my own customer. I'm 86 now, so I kind of know what older people like. We are living longer than any period in history. And centenarians, people who live beyond 100, are going to become commonplace according to the Stanford Center on Longevity. Believe it or not, Stanford University in California actually has a center on longevity because we are living so much longer. Uh, so what makes those years of retirement meaningful? Life is going to end. And when we look back, what do we want to be happy about? For me, retirement was more than a diet of bingo and arts and crafts. I saw an article in a magazine that Horizon Theater was starting a senior ensemble. So that sounded interesting. I come from a background in advertising and public relations. I consider myself a fairly good writer. So I went down and spoke to Jeff and I said, I'd like to write for your group. And he said, oh, well, show me some plays you've written. And I hesitated a moment and I said, I haven't, but I'm a fast learner. He said, well, show me something else you've written. So I did, and he said, you're hired. And I began writing for the group, and pretty soon Jeff said, why aren't you acting? I said, I'm a writer, not an actor. He said, no, try it. So I tried it. I loved it. Then one day he said to me, I want you to direct that short play you've written. I said, I'm not a director. He said, yes, you are. You just don't know it yet. So with Jeff's encouragement, I began taking on more and more duties, and I became a full-fledged ham. I saw the joy and camaraderie of the other members of the senior ensemble, many of whom remain friends until today. Pat Smith, for instance, was somebody I met at the senior ensemble years ago. I studied all I could. I took acting classes, improv classes, writing classes at the Alliance. I joined a second senior ensemble, Mira Hirsch's Jewish Theater of the South, because she worked in a slightly different way than Jeff did. I joined a network of Atlanta women actors. Our acronym was TWITS, you'll love that, which stood for the Women in Theater, TWIT. So what do you do when you're spending 40 hours a week on your hobby? You turn it into your business. I was retired. I knew marketing. I knew how to run a business. I had run an ad agency. I knew marketing. Most important of all, I knew there was a need to help people develop their own creativity. And I had faith that I had just the right product, one that nobody else was offering. I went online to see how many other theaters there were. There were some, none in Atlanta. And the key, I thought, what would make us unique was delivering the product to them. We wouldn't have just one play that everybody came to see. We would have a series of plays that we would take out so we could visit different senior centers and senior housing with different products throughout the year. We would build relationships. And that was the start. As I said, I'm my own customer. I knew what I wanted, and I just knew I had enough friends and I knew enough people that I thought my desire was not unique. There were others like me. Yes, my mother died young, just 58 years old, and my dad remarried. Very nice woman. Her name was Pearl. And they lived in Florida, as many people from New York did. The funnel goes down to Florida. And every time I visited them, they knew I loved theater. So they would take me to the theater. My dad died. Pearl developed esophageal cancer. She could no longer ingest food. She had to have liquid feedings through a port in her abdomen. And that kind of ended her going out because she had to have the feedings every 2 hours. And she said, outings become impossible for me. I have to have my feedings. I said, well, you can go to the restroom. She said, no, that's not something I want to do. And so I kept thinking, well, there must be other, just like there are other people like me, there are other people like Pearl. She lived in a retirement community. So what if we took the theater to them? Remember, I come from a background in marketing, and in marketing, it's always what service or product can you offer that isn't being filled? And I saw there was a need to bring theater to the people. And that's why I worked on developing a model where theater would go to the people wouldn't have to come. We would do plays specifically for senior audiences, which meant not too long. You don't do Shakespeare, you don't do 5 acts, you don't do 3 acts. An hour is fine. For some people, that's as long as they can sit. For other people, that's as long as they can focus. So the product has to be slightly different. It is theater, but there are some changes that you make, some modifications that you make for the audience you're trying to reach. So Pearl was my Pearl. You have to remember that this was a business after all. So I went to my accountant and I said, can I afford to do this? He said, yes, but let's protect you. Let's form a limited liability corporation, what's known as an LLC. And if the concept proved itself, then you could apply to become a 501c3, which is a nonprofit. So we began small. I began calling activity directors and I said, if I had this product, would you be interested in it? And they said, yes, yes. I found out that there was an association of activity professionals, GAP, it was known as GAP. I asked if I could speak at their meeting. And they said, well, we're meeting tomorrow. And I said, well, can I speak? And they said, well, the schedule is kind of full. I'll tell you what, your project sounds interesting. Come at noontime. So I did not expect to get a call for that day. And I quickly began typing on my computer and pressing print, 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 ran down to where the meeting was held and started talking during their lunch hour. And pretty soon everybody was quiet and listening to me. And I said, if you're interested, please give me your business card and I will call you. I was showered with business cards. I said, we have the product, we have the audience, and it's time to get started. And so networking was really very important. As I mentioned, I had joined TWITS. So I sent an email out to all my female actor friends. And I said, I'm old enough to be a grandmother, but I'm about to be a mother. My baby is Atlanta Theater to go. Please come and audition and bring any guys you know, because we have roles for men. And then I also belong to Working Title Playwrights. And I contacted my playwriting friends and said, please send me scripts. And I began with the notion that I would pay. I would pay actors and I would pay playwrights. And I put in $1,000 seed money, which I expected to be repaid. I'm not wealthy. And so we began with some seed money. I contacted Hammond Glen, a retirement community in Sandy Springs. And I said, I need rehearsal space. I'll give you free performances if you'll give me rehearsal space. They said, you're on. And so we now had rehearsal space, we had scripts, we had an audition, and we were off and running. You know, I talk a good game. Remember, I come from a background in marketing. If I don't have faith, you're not going to have faith. But inside, I don't think I slept the night before. And the audience response was wonderful. There was one activity director, especially Sandy Armstrong at Duluth Gardens in Duluth. And so she said to me after we had performed there, she said, you know, Sondra, you go home after a performance, so you don't know what the residents are saying, but I'm here and I hear them staying and talking for an hour after you've left. I hear them talking about the performance at the next morning. I just want you to know how important and how meaningful it is. Our residents feel that because you come to them, you make them feel important, which is very different than the audience coming to you. So along the line, I've learned lessons from the people we deal with. They've been generous with their time, their appreciation. It's been a wonderful ride. Second track that we developed of helping actors, residents put on their own show really came out of the audience. As you know, after our performances, we always introduce the audience, the cast to the audience, because we're in their home essentially. Even if it's a senior center, it's their community that we're in. And as we began talking with one another and talking to the audience members would say, "This looks like so much fun. Don't you have something we can do?" And from that came our second track. And there is nobody who makes a star out of the audience the way Atlanta Theater to Go does. And I think if in marketing, we used to say, look for the unique selling proposition, the USP. For Atlanta Theater to Go, I think that would be our USP. We make stars out of our audience. I believe in respect for your audience, respect for your workers. And I wanted quality. I didn't want people to say, oh yeah, it's just an old age group. I wanted the best that could be. And you have to expect to pay for the best. When I started, I contributed my time. I was retired. When I went to my accountant and said, can I afford to do this? I said, Carl, how much do you spend on golf? He said, why? I said, I'm not going to tell your wife. I just want to know how much you spend on golf. So he gave me a figure and I said, okay, this is my golf. Uh, I will contribute this time. And so I started off contributing my time, but then I realized we needed talent and you have to pay for talent. And when you pay somebody, even if it's a nominal amount, it shows that you respect them. We paid what we could afford. I did ask the activity directors what would be a reasonable amount to charge for our services so that it fits within your budget. We're going to do 4 plays a year. Make sure you have enough money in your budget for us to come back 4 times. And so they gave me a figure, and we started off with $250, and then we raised it to $300. But I think we live in a culture that monetizes everything, and you need to acknowledge that. And I think people are appreciative of the fact that you thought enough of them to pay them. And they know that we're paying what we can afford. I wasn't making any money on it. So the money that came in went right out to the actors. So later on, as uh, as our audience became larger and larger, it was impossible for one person to do it all. We needed a manager, we needed an artistic director. And then when I was ready to retire, I said, okay, we need to know that we have professional help to take over. And so I approached one of our funders and said, I want enough money for somebody to know that their salary and the staff salary is covered for a minimum of a year. And to my joy, I have found that what you need will be there when you need it if you make your need known. The world is not going to be the path to your doorway unless they know you have a better mousetrap. And so even when we started as an LLC and I looked at becoming a nonprofit, which is a costly and difficult process, it's $600 just to apply. And so I invited a group of friends for dinner. And one of them was a couple, Paul and Tina Blackney, and I hiked with Tina. And I said, I need some wisdom. Should I do this? Should I take this leap and incur all this extra work and incur this extra expense? And I listened to what they had to say. And then 2 days later in the mail came a check from Paul with 4 words: do it, good luck. And so I tell people, tell your story. So often when people go to a party and they say, well, what do you do? And if you don't have a job they're interested in, they go on to the next person. I guarantee if you tell somebody I make stars out of people, nobody will leave your side. You will have a group for the whole party. We bring joy. Uh, there, I remember years ago when I was chairing a social action committee at my synagogue, and we were doing a Habitat for Humanity build. And people don't realize it's not just getting people to build. Everybody who builds has to contribute $300 toward the project. And there was a young woman who I knew was unlimited resources. And she joined, and I thanked her profusely because I knew how much it meant to her. And she said, no, no, stop thanking me. She said, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to perform a mitzvah. A mitzvah, colloquially, is a good deed. So what I say to board members is you're giving people the opportunity to perform a good deed. Instead of thinking you're taking something from them by asking for money, you're giving them an opportunity to do something meaningful. And as I approach the end of my days, because I am 86, and maybe I'll live to 100, maybe I won't, um, and I look back and say, okay, what in my life? What have I left in life? What's my legacy? What am I happiest about? It's not the trip I took around the world. It's what I gave to other people. One of the reasons for becoming a nonprofit, because who wants to take on that horrible chore? It took us a full year to accomplish that, is that we could then apply for funding. And you can't apply for funding from government sources unless you are a nonprofit. So we began applying for grants, and receiving a grant also helped with our marketing because we could tell companies, hey, we have a grant from the Georgia Council for the Arts. We have a grant from Fulton County Arts Council. That gives you validity, stature, credibility, and it means that other people recognize you. So even though the process of applying for a grant is exhausting, I'd much rather deal with performances than writing a grant, but receiving the grant is very important. And the grant helped pay for props, printing, costumes, all the associated costs. When I was looking for sponsors, because there isn't enough money in our performances to pay all the overhead of running a business. You can't have a performance without the business that brings the performance. And so I approached a funeral service and I said, have I got an audience for you? And pretty soon they said they would agree to be sponsors. Well, you know, when I would talk about our sponsors before the show, I would mention their name and it became a standing joke. I know you're not dying to meet the sponsor, but when you do, they're really good people. Um, so look at it as a business and tell a business, I can create goodwill for your business. I can create name recognition for your business. We're delivering a solid audience, and as it's the growing demographic of our population, people living in later life. I don't pre-select who would contribute because you really don't know. Tina was a hiking buddy of mine, and we had a play that was set in Lutheran Towers, and I was walking with Tina, and she said, well, so what's new? I said, oh, we got this great play set in Lutheran Towers. The playwright set it in Lutheran Towers, but they don't have money to pay us. She said, oh, I'm a Lutheran. I'll pay you. And so it began with them just paying for that one performance. And pretty soon they said, you know, we'll be sponsors for the season, or we'll do this, or we'll do that. So I don't want to pre-select the people. Sometimes people who have an older relative, a mom, a grandparent, a favorite aunt, a dear friend. In senior living, you'll touch their heart. So it may not be just because they're already interested in theater. It may be they have somebody who's living older and needs to have something. I think when you bring something valuable to people, it makes them feel valuable. Wouldn't you rather have a ring somebody selected for you than something out of the Cracker Jack box? So when you bring something of value to people, you make them feel valuable. Looking for a mix. That's a good way to describe it. People who knew theater, people who loved theater, people who could see the possibilities of theater. And some of that takes experience in theater. It doesn't necessarily come from outside theater. But as I said, I think twice now, it's a business. And so I looked for people who had some business experience or people who had contacts. You look for people who have knowledge, who network, who have contacts. And sometimes, you have to take a leap forward, even if you're not positive of the results. So it's people who are willing to take the leap forward. So your board comes from different backgrounds. But the one thing that they have in common is a desire to do good and to be pleased with doing good. It takes time. I can't sugarcoat it. It takes time. But the time invested will give so many rewards back, much more than you can possibly imagine. I consider my life blessed from having Atlanta Theater to Go. And years ago, oops, we developed this award for our outreach program. And that was validation that what we were doing was meaningful. But you can provide your own validation. And if not, call me, text me, email me, and I'll tell you what a great job you're doing and how proud of you I am for doing it. Continue, right? you know, we are all of us transitory in life. Death is part of life. But institutions can survive and grow if they adapt to change. Now, we've had this pandemic. I'm sure that theater will change in response to this pandemic. I've sat through enough Zoom shows to know that there will be some changes in theater. But what we do that nobody else does is highly personal. And so as long as we can keep making stars out of our audience, more than that, it's helping people tap into their creativity. Just as Jeff Adler helped me, I never started out in life thinking myself as an actor or a producer or a script developer. I think our bodies may age. I've got a stent, I have a pacemaker, I've had a mastectomy, yada, yada, yada. But my brain is still active, and our hearts learn compassion as we grow older. And I think wisdom and compassion are great ingredients. I think respect for what you do, respect for your audience. There's a lot you can learn from the audience members. That's not just a wrinkled old lady or a talkative old geezer. These are people who have life experiences, and those experiences are important and valid. They are a living history. So look at your audience with respect uh, and respect for yourself. Give yourself a pat on the back for what you're doing. Nobody likes asking for money, no matter how many pep talks I give you. And we once had Joan Stewart, who's a certified uh, activity developer. give a talk on how to ask for money because people hate to ask for money. But you know what? If you look at it and say, I'm giving them an opportunity, I'm not taking something from them, I'm giving something. Life continues. I'm actually working with Horizon Theater on an intergenerational program. So I just finished working with the kids at the new school on writing and performing a short play, which we did. It was all about climate change and it was called March On. So I had to learn about performing on Zoom. Oh my God. I can't wait to get back to in person performing.